to the Only One Mic podcast called Jerard, Bklyn Dre. JRob is off tonight, and our special guest that we have with us is Maher. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, man.
All right.
I'm doing really good.
Okay.
I'm fresh off the ground of being in Australia.
Yes, sir.
Hanging out in the outback with some Aboriginal elders and feeling the vibe out there. And, you know, it's a privilege, because where are you going to go around the world where people have maintained their culture and it's still intact, right? They have their own government. They have the ways in which they used to operate at a tribal level. They're still operating that way today, while still, you know, being at the effect of, you know, Western involvement, right?
Was it your first time there?
Yeah, it was my first time there.
Wonderful, man.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I plan to go back.
Yeah, yeah. What was
because the vibe out there is unbelievable.
What was the biggest takeaway you had from all of that? I know you just explained a lot, but when you come back into the States, what do you look at and you say, wow?
You know, Australia has the opportunity to really be a utopian society. Of all the countries that I've ever been into, I've been into in the world. They have an enormous landmass. They only have 26 million people, right? We have more people in California than they have on that entire landmass, right? And then they have beautiful oceans. Their nature is dynamic. They've got these two different cultures butting up against each other. They have a large Asian population. They have a large Middle Eastern population. And, you know, I like a multicultural vibe. I like to be sitting somewhere eating dinner and I can't understand a word anyone is saying.
You just know the food is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
The universal language, right?
Yeah. The thing for me as someone who is African American is that I was never once racially profiled. Okay. And they were kind and generous. They were, they were on their toes. They met my needs when I needed them. I never felt any rejection. And one thing, you never feel unsafe in Australia.
Right.
Like wherever you are, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're walking down the street. Women are walking down the street at 2 o'clock in the morning without running fear the way that you might if you live in Philly, New York, Houston, San Antonio, Miami. Yeah. You know, it's a really safe place. People are, how would I say it? People are emotionally responsible, right? Meaning that whatever emotions they're dealing with, they work on it on their own, and they don't involve everyone else around them in whatever drama or trauma they have.
So you didn't feel like that somebody following you around the store kind of thing? And
yeah, no. Looking at what I'm bringing,
right.
To the counter, checking my pockets. No, none of that. Right. But what the coolest thing for me is I kept ending up in elevators with Caucasian women, and not one of them ever moved their purse to the other side.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yes.
And that's a common occurrence when I get in an elevator with a white man or a white woman. Definitely. And it's not something that I've ever talked about with anyone. It's just something that I feel like, okay, well, this is the process, right? Usually what I do in that situation is I look at them, I go, hey, look, you're safe. I'm not going to take your keys. I'm not going to take your wallet.
Oh, right.
If there's anybody you would want in this elevator with you, it would be me.
Yeah.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they kind of soften. But here's the truth. I don't want to have to stop and tell adults, right? That I'm a safe person. You should be able to feel the vibe, right?
Right.
And that should move beyond your projection of what you've picked up from the media. Because I give off a very peaceful, grounded, solid, open vibe.
Right.
You got to move your purse, and I'm in an elevator with you, then there's something going on with you, and you shouldn't be projecting that on me.
Exactly. Exactly. So, you know, this kind of is a good segue into the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
I want to just say that, you know, you're an author. Okay. Yep. And can you discuss your book, you know, that you have out?
Yeah. I mean, I released my book on 9/11 2019. And the reason why I chose 9/11 is because that was the first time since we had a world war that I feel like everyone dropped into an intense state of fear, right? I remember the next day getting on the highway and flying to Washington, D.C., and there was only 3 people on the plane with me.
And it's funny that you say that because even when we've seen the effects of COVID, you know, there's nothing scarier than to see major cities like Philly and New York and DC as ghost towns.
It's like deserts,
Yeah, you know, it's like stuff you might see on a movie or something like that. But like for us to experience in real time. So, you know, during the time of 9/11, when that happened, just to see the fear, you know, in the faces of the people and the towers collapsing. Because, you know, much like probably everybody sitting on this show here, we all seen it in real time.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the scariest thing. It actually, you know, it brings a tear to your eye because us being, you know, native New Yorkers, we can think of times when we were in that building, you know, for one reason or the next. And so I can totally understand, you know, and I look at the title of your book is Free for Life, you know, which is an interesting title, you know, for you to have for the book. What made you choose that?
I mean, I chose it because, you know, my focus in this life is freedom, right? And what I realized right away with being in interpersonal relationships, being in romantic relationships, being in familial relationships, being in professional relationships is that when you're not free and you have no sense of freedom, it's impossible to access unconditional love.
Right.
And so the only way to drop into a utopian society is if humans have a sense of freedom. I mean, a deep sense of freedom. And of course, I come from a culture that was enslaved, which is the opposite of freedom. And I said to myself in this life, there's no aspect of me that will die a slave. Okay. Not emotionally, not energetically, not spiritually, not psychologically, not physically. I'm going to be free to choose to do whatever I want when I want. So for me, we started this conversation out a little bit, talking about 9/11. The next day I was on a flight. I fell asleep on the flight. I had no fear, right? Because I wasn't going to participate in whatever was going on.
That's what I was going to ask you. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask you, what's your definition of freedom? But you kind of answered it right there. And that's a good, you said like you wasn't going to have any fear. And, that's deep in itself.
You know, the thing for me is, I remember coming home at night and I pray a lot. So I'm always asking God questions. And he said to me, look, I only need one person to get free. That's it. I don't need millions and millions of people to get free. I need one person to get free so that there's a path to freedom laid out that anyone who wants to can then follow it, right? Like one person had to make the cell phone. If one person doesn't make cell phone, nobody has a cell phone, right? One person had to make the knife. That person doesn't make knife. No one benefits from that knife. So we don't need hundreds of millions of people doing this. And he said, look, I believe in you. And I said, okay, I'm going to devote my life to this path. And so I do everything that I can to get free from the limitations of fear, right? And every culture has gone through some level of fear-based oppression, right? And suppression, whether it's Jewish folks, whether it's Russians, whether it's Africans, whether it's African Americans, whether it's Argentinians or Brazilians. Everybody's been through some shit along the way, right? The problem is that generations that go through difficult things, as they move forward, they continue to keep the thing that they move through. So I remember, and this is funny, I flew into DC after 9/11 and I went to a Whole Foods to get some food. And the way that the Caucasians were treating African Americans in the grocery store, I was disgusted. And the fact that African Americans were participating in that broke my heart, because they were walking around the store as if, yes, sir. Yes, master. I'll get you whatever you need. And I was looking at this and I was like, hold on. Right. I'd never been at the effects of that, right? Because Pennsylvania's a little further north.
Right.
And, you know, people from Philly by nature are a little bit rebellious. Right? They're not willing to bend the knee as easily. So when I had that experience of that, I thought, yeah, when I get home, I'm going to work really hard to see where I'm doing that in my life, where I'm bowing my own head to someone who doesn't have my best interest.
Right.
So I decided to, or let's say I got lucky enough to pull some people into my life that would help me remove massive amounts of generational tension, generational stress, generational limiting beliefs. And I went at it, 5-6 hours a day to put myself together in a very unique way. And the way that I put myself together, and the reason why I did that, is so that I could be the message rather than being a messenger. It's easy to get on a mic, right? Like I'm doing today, and it's easy to talk about freedom. It's very difficult to be freedom.
Okay. And that was the inspiration for the book. For folks that's here, you're probably one of the calmest brothers we've had on this show. Completely. Hands down.
But you know what I was going to say, and it's kind of weird, I went to the VA hospital today, right? And just being in the VA hospital, you got two different kind of soldiers. You got the extreme, and and then I was just noticing just in the hospital. I said, man, sometimes when you sit down and talk to people in the military, they're the most calmest people you ever want to meet. You know what I mean? And I think it's like you said, I don't know if it's just more so that we've experienced a lot of weird things and then you just know how to adapt to it. You don't really find a lot of military people that are just like, older military, not younger, but, people that have retired and stuff like that, or that are like, they're usually pretty calm. I was going to say that. So.
Yeah. And it makes sense because if you look at the military, you have to understand that very quickly, as soon as you get to boot camp, they're cutting your hair off. Right. So whatever false image you're projecting or whatever identity you're connected into, they're going to strip that away day one. Right. And then on day two, everything's going to be about teaching you details, paying attention to detail. And every time that you fall away from a detail and you get absent-minded, guess what you get? You get some push-ups.
Right.
Right. Oh, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't present. I wasn't focused.
Yeah.
And then bam, here comes some more push-ups. So every time that you slipped, you got rewarded with an opportunity to get more present. It was very interesting when you look at the human body, which aspect of the body is focused on being present? No, the mind is future, right? The emotions are past oriented. The spirit is timeless, but the body is present centered day to day.
Right.
So the military is designed and structured in such a way to help people get more present. And when you're present and you realize that you're part of a unit, you don't control anything. And I think when a human realizes that they're part of something bigger than them and they're willing to let go of their need for things to look a certain way in order for them to be okay, that gives you a certain level of internal confidence.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I worked in a field where it's like, we deal with older, elderly autistic people, and, people always saying like when things happen, seizures, different things, they always telling me like, you're so calm. You're so calm. In reality, in my mind, I'm probably just as stressed out as they are, but, I'm probably not just showing it to them. You know what I mean? I mean, do you have people saying that to you in different kind of situations like that?
Yeah,
also?
I mean, not when I was in the SEAL teams. That was
okay. Not. Yeah.
That is not the vibe that they were getting. I was getting the exact opposite vibe, right? They were like, "Man, you're so intense."
Intense, right?
What was interesting though is inside, I always felt calm. Right. Yet for the energy that I was transmitting to them was an energy that they weren't used to, right? Because when you go through something like SEAL training, you're in the SEAL teams, your confidence level is very, very high, and your self-assuredness is really, really high too. So you're very clear on the mission at hand and your task, and you're very confident about the way that you go about it, and you're unwilling to let other people influence your decision making. And that's tough when you're with someone like that, for other people who haven't been through situations that challenge their thought, that challenge their emotions, that challenge their spirit, that challenge their energy, that challenge their body. And when you get on the other side of something like that, you've gone through what I call a rite of passage, right? And if you look at all tribal communities in Africa, they always had it set up that there was a rite of passage for the young men in the tribe. Right. So I use SEAL training as a rite of passage. So when I walked across the stage and I picked up my diploma, I knew no man was ever going to tell me how to live, how to think, when to breathe, when to jump. I had earned my right to make my own decisions.
Right. Then it's funny because you say SEAL training, but I was telling my brother also too, like when I got out the military, like I remember taking like like they give you a test for PTSD and stuff like that. And I'm like, and the stuff that they were talking about is kind of funny. I was telling them, I said, man, I had these issues before I even joined the military. I mean, I think just growing up in the neighborhood, man, we have these, we already have like PTSD before we even, so could you imagine, you deal with the neighborhood, you go through all of that, and then you go through the military training, you feel like you can conquer pretty much anything, you know what I mean? Stress-wise.
Yeah. And so it makes it more easy. It makes it more difficult for someone in the military to be shaken because you've been around so many things that are difficult to deal with. And, in the military, the other thing is there's no moaning or complaining.
Oh, no.
Right. That is outside of the atmosphere. And so the reason why there isn't that is because people have to learn how to self-soothe, right? Mm-hmm. They have to learn how to take care of themselves emotionally. Right. And there's nothing like being in cold water and being exhausted physically and then having to make a good decision to put you in a situation where you have to go, do I really want to be here? Is this really for me? Because people in the military, honestly, they don't need to be there. If they want to get out, they can get out.
Right.
And so that you volunteered for the things that you're going through versus, when you're young and you're growing up in the hood, you don't know, you didn't volunteer for that. Not at a personality level. At a soul level, you did, but not at a personality level. So it's easy to make excuses, right? But when you volunteer for something, you put your name on the line, you know that you signed up for what you're getting. You're participating.
Right.
And there's something about that because you're owning your own life.
Yeah, and at that point, you're too far into it. Some people just don't want to feel like, I'm just going to quit this thing. And, to not go back home and have people look at you a certain way. So now it's like a self-conscious thing.
It's funny because the first night I was in there, I was like, man, I know I'm not going to re-enlist in this. But like you said, I knew I was going to do whatever time I signed up for, you know what I mean? Right off the back. But, it's funny that he said that, man.
So Chris, how long have you been in the SEALs?
I was in that community for about 6.5 years.
6.5 years? Okay.
Yeah.
And is it like, I don't know if you've ever been in combat situations or anything of that nature. Have you?
The SEAL teams is, how do we say this? We're always operational ready.
Right.
So when you're in the SEAL teams, you have 6-month deployments and anybody in a SEAL team platoon, they get deployed.
Right. Because mixed with everything that you was telling me, I was just having a thought as you was explaining it, is that, your confidence level is high. And if you've actually probably been through combat and all, do you have a almost like a sense of I'm invincible?
You have that sense. Well, you have that sense of invincibility when you're going through SEAL training. Okay. And it's very, very, very high. And then what happens is it stays with you. Right. You feel like you could walk through walls. You have so much adrenaline and cortisol moving through your system. Yet at some point, you take that edge too far.
Right.
And then something happens, right? You either get a DUI or you got back pain. Now you're getting into insomnia And I go over a lot of that stuff in my book.
Yeah.
Is that you're always looking for that edge and whatever's going to get you on that edge. So you're driving fast. A lot of guys in the SEAL teams, they get into jujitsu and martial arts afterwards and get black belts. Like they're always looking for that confrontation. They're always looking for that edge. They're always looking to push themselves. And you can take the edge too far. And if you take it too far, you end up making a poor decision. And then that poor decision puts some aspect of your life in pain, right? Whether it's emotional pain, whether it's psychological pain, whether it's physical pain from your joints, or you need a fusion of your cervical spine or a fusion of your lower lumbar, or you're in financial pain because you're making bad decisions. And so the reason why I wrote Free for Life and the motivation behind that was to get the information out there to people who have done things that are extraordinary because they wanted to feel like they were winning at life.
Right.
And to inform them that the things that you do don't determine who you are. The way that you're being when you're doing the things that you're doing determines who you are. And so part of the book was to shift people's mindset from doing into being, so they could get their self-esteem from who they are rather than what they do. Because men in our societies across the planet have always been judged by what we do, right? So if you make more money, or you have positional leverage, or you have more education, you get greater opportunities. Okay. So, and people give you status, right?
Right.
There comes a point in your life where you realize, well, the status has nothing to do with it. It's really about the love, right?
It's a fact.
And, you know, because love is the only thing that is a solution for anything. And in the beginning, it's all there ever was, right? And I try to get this concept to people so they understand it, that in the beginning, all there was love. When God added light to love, which is information, it created the Big Bang. But love is all there was in the beginning. But in the end, love is all that ever matters. Information is wonderful. Minus love and inspiration, it's pointless. Because my feeling is people have an opportunity to inspire and to transform and to grow. And if we're inspiring and we're transforming and we're helping other people grow and we're growing equally, the world gets to be a better place every day that I'm focused in that way. Because all of humanity is every human is one drop of water in an ocean of experience. Beautiful thing about water is it holds electrical charge, right? So if I amplify my light and I get my electrical charge high, I can influence a lot of drops of water to raise their vibration. And if we do that successfully, guess what happens? Every human on the planet gets to experience more freedom.
All right. So how does the individual, I know we talked earlier about, you know, a certain amount of baggage and things that people carry with them. And I know in your book, you address a lot of stuff like that. You addressed a lot of ways, I guess, to, you know, get rid of the excess negativity and all. What would you say to an individual in order for them to reach that point where they can be that electrical charge, but they have to get rid of, you know, the things that set them in order to free their mind to do that?
Yeah, it's very easy. I distilled it down to this. Whatever's in your body is in your life. What does that mean?
Right.
Whatever's in your body is in your life. So if you're unhappy with the way that your life is working, what's the prudent thing to do? The prudent action to take is to go into your body and reduce your stress load, right? So the formula that people need to understand is unresolved stress leads to a little bit of tension, right? That tension creates structural distortion in your body. Once you have structural distortion in your body, your emotions are distorted, your thoughts are distorted, and your energy is distorted. The question is, what does that distortion lead to? It leads to either physical pain, emotional pain, psychological pain, or spiritual pain, meaning people get mentally unwell, emotionally unwell, physically unwell, or spiritually sick. What do we say where someone's spiritually sick? Well, they're unethical, they're immoral, They're unprincipled and they're disintegrous. If someone's emotionally unwell, what do we know? They have an intense amount of anxiety. If someone's physically unwell, what do we know? Their organs are shutting down. They have structural discomfort. They're losing one of their sense organs. They have diminished vision. They have diminished hearing. They have diminished smell. They have diminished taste. And then if someone is mentally unwell, what do we know? They're paranoid, right? They're schizophrenic. They're dipping into alcohol. They're dipping into drugs. They're using the daily acceptable drugs like nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, white sugar, marijuana, pharmaceuticals, food colorings, and preservatives every day, and they're addicted to them, right? So we already know what the outcomes. The challenge is people don't understand how they ended up with the outcome in the first place. So what happens is when a child is born and the parent is inappropriate with the child, and what I mean by that, they either use their hand or their voice to shock the child's nervous system into doing exactly what they want the child to do. What happens is that child then creates what's called a winning strategy, a way of avoiding their parents' anger, a way of avoiding their parents' upset, a way of avoiding their parents' punishment. And when you have children that are being raised in households where they're doing everything they can to avoid punishment, rejection, humiliation, discomfort, and violence, that child is then going to continue to apply that strategy as an adult. The challenge is that strategy is going to make them very successful. And then that success is going to reach its end point. And then they're going to have to go, I think I need to see a therapist. Because the badge of honor that they wear as a man in the world to say that, hey, I'm successful, it's going to have limitations. And the way those limitations show up are in your relationships.
So if I'm trying to correct myself and get myself back on point, what should you attack first? Should you attack the mind or the body, or, you know?
No, the first thing you got to do is you got to figure out which of the daily acceptable drugs is the one that you're addicted to.
Okay.
Is it sugar? Is it caffeine? Is it nicotine? Is it alcohol? Or is it marijuana? Or is it pharmaceuticals?
Right. We all got a poison.
Yep. Whatever one that is, the one that's the strongest, you have to eliminate that one, right? And the easy way to do it is this. Let's say it's caffeine. This is a simple one. Or let's say it's caffeine or weed. The next week, only drink or smoke half as much. The next week, only drink or smoke a quarter as much. The next week, only drink or smoke half of that. And then the next week, by the end of 4 weeks, you stop. And then by the end of those 4 weeks, mentally, you'll be way more present, which means you're going to have a mind that's more quiet and a lot less racing. It's going to reduce the amount of anxiety that you have in your body, because guess what? All the daily acceptable drugs, they're all anxiogenics. What does that mean? That means they're anxiety causing agents. They actually create anxiety. Yeah. And when someone is anxious and they get hooked on the daily acceptable drugs, what happens? They're no longer present. And if you're not present, you can't take advantage of what's in front of you. And guess what you do? You make poor decisions.
Right.
So then instead of going home and making a chicken salad, right, you stop by McDonald's and you grab something quick.
Right.
Right.
Well, guess what? When you do that 1,000 or 10,000 times, eventually the heart says, uh-oh, I think it's time we stop playing this game.
Right.
Right.
You know, it's funny that you should say that, because I'm going to share this with you, right? What happens is, well, I already told you, I had a kidney transplant back in 2020. We talked about that before the show. But around that time, I was introduced to a herbalist that was in my church, right? And what he did was he was telling me to, change my diet, right? So at that time, I started eating nothing but fruits and vegetables and water and drinking water and, stuff like that. And I really didn't eat too much meat and stuff like that. And my kidney at that time, actually got better. You know what I mean? And also too, like you said, your skin gets better. You feel more, conscious, aware of things and everything like that. So I agree with a lot of stuff that you're talking about, you know what I mean? Because it definitely helped me out. I lost a lot of weight and everything like that, and it helped me out tremendously, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because when you're pointed in a direction that's creating a lot of stress for you, because you're stressed and that's your baseline, you need to maintain that level of stress to feel normal, because that's now your new normality, right? Well, when you reduce that stress, right? When you reduce your addiction to the daily acceptable drugs, that's the fastest way to start to help your mental health, your emotional health, your energetic health, and your spiritual health. Because when you feel bad, you do bad. When you feel good, you do good. I mean, here's the thing. God made it simple, right? He said, look, I gave you a body. It's set up to feel good. If you do things to it that make it feel bad, you're going to end up doing bad.
Right.
And then when you do bad, I'm going to set it up so that the universe rewards you with a hard slap across your face to remind you to get that body back to feeling good.
Right, right.
But then what happens is most people are always ignoring the body. So they think, okay, I'm only going to get into meditation, or I'm going to go into silence when I go home at night. I'm not going to do any talking for at least a couple hours before I go to sleep. Still, you're ignoring the body, right? And the thing about African Americans have very strong bodies, like very, very, very strong bodies. And because their bodies are so strong, they use them inappropriately. Because the next day they can recover quickly from a bad decision. Right?
Right.
Where Caucasians, they can't do that as fast. So they feel the negative things that they do to their bodies quicker.
Wow. Yeah.
When your body's really strong and you're doing something that's not good for it, you barely feel it. You have a body has medium strength, right? You do something that's not good for it, you feel it really intensely the next day. So now what happens is you start making more poor decisions because you're uninformed, because you're innately so strong. And that's what slavery did for African Americans, right? Because if you imagine you got a boat coming across from Africa, the ones that made it already are stronger, right? The ones that make it through slavery to get old enough to bear a child, right? And to make a child, they're even stronger. Do that for 400 years.
Right.
The children that are born 400 years later, they can take a lot of stress.
Well, not to mention, I think we're the only people that's probably been breeded, in the world, you know what I mean? So again, you go back to, breeding a big black woman with a big black, or strong black woman with a strong black man. And, so I think that plays a lot into it.
Yeah, that plays a lot.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because, we talked about this on the show before. Even the perception of what society has. This is why you have, the George Floyds. This is why you have Rodney King, because for some odd reason, it's just like they think that we're superhuman.
We can take more than anybody else.
That beating and that tasing and all of that these guys will be all right. They'll recover from it.
I had an African history professor years ago, and he was talking about when he brought up the Rodney King thing, and he was saying, like, if we saw a Chinese man or any other ethnic group beaten like that man, everybody would feel so bad about it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
But as long as you're looking at an African American doing it, you're thinking to yourself, there's a possibility that he can win. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's a possibility that he can overcome what's happening to him or something like that. So I thought that was deep, man.
Yeah. And the truth is, it's true. When two men or two women get into a room, their bodies communicate and they know whose is stronger, right? They know whose will is stronger. So the will of the African American has been amplified because Africans, they have more magnetism. So if you look at basically the three races, and we call them Mongoloids, Caucasoids, and Negroids, Asians, which would be Mongoloids, they have more electrical charge in their brains. That's why they're much more energetically sensitive. Right. And then Africans have much more magnetic charge in their bodies. Okay. But they have less electricity in their brains. And the Caucasians are in the middle. So they have a decent amount of magnetism, and they have a decent amount of electrical charge.
Right.
So if you were going to get into a physical confrontation, right, you would choose the person who has a stronger body to deal with that physical confrontation.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so energetically, they can feel that, right? It's like when you have two lions roaming the plains in Africa, the other lion knows that that other lion is stronger from, 1,000 yards away.
Right.
Mm.
He knows.
Yeah.
Right? He can feel it. It's in his presence. And so people are going to treat you likewise.
Mm.
And the thing about it for African Americans to understand is that they've been gifted with so much in terms of everything that they've been through. They're actually designed to be superhuman. Okay. Because of everything they've been through, their will is super strong. Physiologically, they're very strong. Structurally, they're very strong. Mentally, they're very strong. And energetically, they're powerhouses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so when you look at that, if you gave them a little bit of development, right?
Right.
Just a little bit of development, they would excel in every field in the world. And yet, because they have so much internally, they have to do very little in order to keep moving forward. So when you get, and coaches say this all the time when they have athletes, my most talented athletes are never the ones that make it. It's my athletes that aren't as talented because they have to work harder so they understand the value of work.
Right.
Right.
And so I look at the African American community and I see them and I go, they have every opportunity to be dominating in the world. And yet they don't. There's something there underneath that has been brought into the mix that makes it difficult for them. And when I'm a fan of wrestling. Okay. And when I see African American kids wrestling white kids, okay, they never punish them. But when you see at the college or collegiate level, you see two black kids that are wrestling each other, they go at it like two Wolverines. But the African American kids never go at it like that with white kids when they're wrestling them. You ever notice they never try to knock the socks off of Tom Brady?
Yeah. Right.
No. But if McNabb was back there, or Michael, he's going to get it, right? Yeah. Because African Americans feel comfortable bringing that level of confrontation and heat to another African American, but in a certain way, they don't feel like bringing that level of heat to a Caucasian.
I think it's funny too, because even and it goes back to what we were just talking about, because even like officiated in the NFL, if you tap Tom Brady, there's a penalty flag, you know what I mean? But if you hit Cam Newton, you know what I mean? You might get away with it, you know what I mean? So
yeah, but that's the refs, but I'm talking the other side.
Right.
I'm talking about there's something been inherently baked in over the last 400 years that lets the other person's nervous system know that, like, I could crush this guy, but I don't think he's going to survive this hit.
Right.
And so I'm going to take him down, but I'm going to do it nicely.
I hear you.
So, you know what? I wanted to ask you too, when you go back to children and the diminishing strategies, I'm big on this. Like, we all watch the news. We all see what's going on, in terms of the violence, especially amongst young people.
Yep.
And I've always been of the mind that, children are the type that if, I can't be the best in something, then I'm going to be the worst in something. Either way, I'm a part of the conversation. So, like, environmentally, when you see the stresses that go on, with kids with the violence in the streets, violence in the schools and all, what is your opinion on how that shapes their mind? Is that something that's like they could have inherently got generational wise, or especially amongst our community?
I mean, they definitely got it generational wise, but it's an interesting conversation. There was a book out there written in, like the early 2000s. And what they discovered at a genetic level is that Africans practice what's called endogamy. What that means is they kept their gene within their tribe, right? And so 50 miles down the road, you could have another tribe, but that tribe genetically is more different than the other person in the other tribe in relationship to a European. Right. And here's why. 3% of the genetic potential left Africa. When it left Africa, it spread out across the rest of the world. So the rest of the world is only sharing 3% of the genetic potential that originally left Africa. Mm-hmm. So that means the tribe that's next door to another tribe in Africa is genetically more diversified than it is to the tribe compared to another person in Europe or South America. So that means if I take an African from Nigerian and I pull his blood and I pull the blood of an English person, genetically, they're closer in genetics than they are to the tribe next door.
Right.
Because the rest of the world practices what's called exogamy, which means you pick someone that's outside of your tribe. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at African Americans, they pulled all these Africans from different tribes and they put them together and they separated them from their innate orientation to God. Mm. And they separated them from their innate orientation to nature and food and culture. And now they mixed them all together and said, look, you're all black, which meant you're all the same. The truth is there's a kid that's next door in the projects. Genetically, he's more like the white person 15 miles away than he is the person that's next door, because that person's genetic is more from New Guinea than the other person. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I got you.
And so what happens is when you look and you don't feel a genetic connection to someone else in the same way, you feel okay taking them out. Mm. Like lions, they don't really feel cool about killing other lions, but they feel cool about killing everything else.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, okay. So now when you look at the South, right, which is, has been less gentrified genetically, okay, right, they're still holding on to that original gene pool, because right, there's a lot of African Americans down South that don't have any Caucasian blood in their system. Mm. Yeah. So they're naturally going to be more confrontational in that community.
Right. Okay.
Right. And it's based on genetics. And if people understood that, they go, oh, okay. Because see, the people who came off the boat from Ireland 300 years ago, they moved right into the Irish community. The slaves that came from Nigeria, they didn't move into a Nigerian community.
No.
They moved into a community that they shared with other Africans that have practiced endogamy for 50, 60, 70,000 years. And though their skin might be black, they don't recognize who they are genetically because their genetics are so different.
And it's funny you mention that, because we had a Haitian American artist, Samson Thompson, yeah, on maybe a couple of days ago or so.
A couple of days ago.
Yeah, a couple of days ago. And so we asked him about, his feelings towards, him being native from Haiti, the violence that's going on in Haiti right now. We discussed, how it's being ignored by the U.S.
Yeah.
And he said something interesting along the lines that you said. He said the reason why it is the way it is because people over there don't know who they are.
That's right.
And
that's right.
It totally took me back to that conversation we had with him. He's like, you don't know who you are.
Yep. You don't. And they don't. Because they, if I had my druthers, meaning if I had my choice, I would have every African American do a 23andMe test.
Right.
And then I would send them over to Africa to find their families.
Mm. Right.
Okay. I would say, okay, you did your 23andMe. You know what 23andMe shows? It shows that you're 96% New Guinea. You need to go over there and hook into that vibe. Right. You need to be over there for like a month, right?
Yeah.
Get in touch with your folks, because see, the people in New Guinea, they've been holding that vibe for 60,000 years. Mm-hmm. Okay. So as soon as you drop in, you have the right genetic, your whole system's going to activate.
Right.
But when you're in Haiti, right? Haiti, right? They're going to have completely different cultural norms that actually don't vibe with who you are. And that's, let's say you come to LA, right? In LA, we got Koreatown, we got Chinatown, we got the section where the Mexicans live, we got the section where the African Americans live, we got the section where the Jews live, we got the section where the Irish live, but the African Americans are all put together and none of them come from the same tribe. Makes absolutely no sense, right? The Italians don't come here and live in the Irish section of town. They don't. The Koreans don't move into Chinatown. The Filipinos don't move into Koreatown. Now you got all these Africans from their genetic from all over Africa, and you just piecemeal them all together and say, well, you're all the same because your skin's the same color. That's like saying Koreans and Chinese and Japanese are all the same. If you put Japanese and Koreans and Chinese all in the same section of town, you know what you're going to find? Violence.
Violence. It's going to be conflict.
There's going to be conflict.
It's going to be conflict.
Right?
And they're going to they're going to separate themselves.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this is a conversation that no one's really had publicly before.
Right.
Right. And it's like, what's the solution? The solution is very simple. Get a 23andMe test and go back to where your blood is the most dominant. If it shows on your 23andMe test that you're 72% Nigerian, don't go to Cabo San Lucas for vacation.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, touchdown. See where it's like.
Yeah.
See what your people are like.
Touchdown in Nigeria, right? Like, go there and get in the vibe. Because as soon as you get in there, your genetic charge is going to change.
Yep.
And then you're going to know who you are. If you don't know who you are, you're always going to be battling with other people to try to figure out who you are. You can never figure out who you are through pain. You can only figure out who you are through love.
It's no section in no city in the free world like where it's like just Africa town. You don't like how they have a Chinatown or anything like that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. They'll just say that's the hood. That's the hood. We just put them on. Yeah, we have Italy and all that, and the rest of that's the hood. You know.
Yeah.
It's an interesting take that you took on that, because I always took that as meaning like, you know, when African Americans are violent towards each other, I took it as being like slave masters mentality. You know what I mean? Whereas like, you know, we were always taught that whites were off limits. You can't hurt them. You know what I mean? So I always thought that was, you know, the thing. That's where I always took it as the reason why, you know, we have that black on black crime and mentality and stuff like that. But it's an interesting take that you take on it too. You know, it's very deep.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Go into the section in the Jewish sections of town in LA. Do you find Irish people?
Nope.
No.
Do you find Italians living there? No, because people like to they like to gather with their people.
Oh, they put their culture together. Yeah.
And because they put their culture together, guess what happens? They're able to be successful financially. They're able to be successful. Why? Because they give each other a leg up.
Right.
If you're in the Filipino section of town, you know, your son's 19, you talk to your best buddy, hey, you know, Josh is really into what you're doing, man. Oh, send him over. I'll give him an internship. Right? You got African, and then the other side of this is you got African Americans that are wanting to have leverage opened up for them from other communities. And other communities are like, take care of your own people.
Yeah.
Like, this is what the Irish do. You go to Irish section of town, they take care of the Irish. You go Italian section of town, they take care of the Italians. If you're in an Italian section of town, you're not supposed to be there, and you're doing things in the wrong way, they're going to take you out.
Oh yeah.
It's plain and simple.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's like it like that they you know, they have their own section, they police their own thing, they do their own thing.
Yeah, I always thought it was interesting in New York, you know, man, you know, always growing up, I thought it was interesting that the fact that in Crown Heights that, you know, you have that Jewish community, which, you know, I've brought people from outside of New York to New York, and to see that, you know, I'm like that shift in the hood, like this, you go from like the hood to the Hasidic community, and people used to, you know, like we grew up in New York understanding it, but you know, people that are outside, I brought my friends from the South and they were like, yo, this is crazy. We didn't know like the Jews lived that close to the African Americans in the hood, you know what I mean? So it's a weird thing, you know, but
and the conversation for the people who are listening, get motivated to figure out who you are. Who you are is at least, meaning, I'm going to say it in a different way. How you're expressing yourself is at least 14 generations old, right? Mm. Go back 14 generations and you need to figure out where your people came from, and you need to get into that vibe. Right. And once you get into that vibe, you know your place in this world. Mm. Okay. South Africans, they're South Africans. Nigerians are Nigerians. Okay. New Guinea folks, they're New Guinea. Okay. People from Ghana, they're Ghanaian. Right, they know who they are. Right. They know who their ancestors are. They have the stories of their people. Yeah. The Africans over here, they don't have any of the stories of their ancestors.
Right. Yeah. And then our African friends, our Caribbean friends, man, they take a huge pride in, for sure, coming from where they come from. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Like I guess we here in America, if you want to take the pride in whatever neighborhood in Brooklyn or whatever you come from, but it's nothing like I watch them, like their culture, like they sit down and eat together and, they're eating out the same pot and, it's crazy, but it's interesting.
Yeah. And genetically, they're more connected, right? You Definitely. Go back 14 generations. The thing about this, and I said this just a little bit earlier, they have connection to their ancestor stories. African Americans have no connection to their ancestor stories. The only stories they have connection to are stories of slavery.
Right.
Well, before slavery existed, there were 60,000 to 250,000 years of history.
Right.
And they don't have any connection to that. So there's this stopgap, right? Well, what's on the other side of 400 years of slavery is who you are. That's where you come from. Mm-hmm. Right? I know you're wearing the red, white, and the blue, but you know what? The people from Ghana, they were completely different colors. Mm-hmm. Nigerians were different colors than the South Africans. The South Africans were different colors than the people from New Guinea, but they do it for a reason. Right? It's not, their flag has history, and every African American belongs more to one of those flags. Exactly. And if you don't know who you are, you can never represent where you come from. And if you can't represent where you come from, you can only go back to the tragedies that you experienced. Mm-hmm. You can't go back to before the tragedy. This is the problem in African American community. They have no connection to their root.
Right. And if all you focus on is the tragedy, then generationally, the tragedy, as we see now, is going to manifest
defines
itself.
You.
Yeah, and it defines
you.
Yeah.
So African Americans are letting themselves be defined by slavery as opposed to the 60,000 years before slavery.
Right.
Right. And when you do that, you cut yourself off from all of your power. Mm. Your power is in your ancestors. If you don't know who your ancestors are, how can you represent? How?
So you're saying that do you believe, I mean, obviously with your training and, your treatment, is there a way to unpack?
Oh, sure.
All of this stuff?
Easy for me, buddy. Easy. Okay. I've created systems that allow you to shed all of that.
Right.
So, all you got to do, you put 1,500 people or 1,200 people in a theater, and I will sit down and remove all that nonsense. And they will leave, and they will have no attachment to slavery any longer.
What's one of the systems you would use?
It's called Body of Light.
Okay. Explain it.
Explain that. So basically what happens is the way that energy works, the way that the body's intended to work is you have a divine connection to your soul, okay? And your soul is the boss, okay? But what happens is the trauma in your body tries to convince you that your mind is the boss. Okay. So now you're trying to supersede the soul with analysis. Okay. So what I've done is I've created a system that allows you to use the word, right? In the beginning, there was the word, and the word was with God. But here's the hustle. And then the word was God. What does that mean? That means that the word has the ability to create new vibrations and energy and connection, but it also has the ability to reroute and disengage you from any energy that's inauthentic to who you are. And this is what nobody knows and or understands. But I've been doing this for 15 years? Sure. I've been resetting people's nervous systems back to neutral. And so they're no longer connected to the tragedy that their ancestors went through. If you're connected more to the tragedy than you are to your ancestors, you will only continue to be your tragedy. And there's no way to think, you can't think your way out of it. You're either in alignment with your ancestors or you're in alignment with your tragedy. Okay. So all you got to do is put a bunch of people in a room. I will fly in and I will lift that energy off of them. And they can never go back to the way that they were, because the way that God designed me was to open doors that were closed and close doors that no man can open. And he gave me the power to do that.
So do you think prayer also is like one of those things that can bring you
Prayer's
in?
Nice. Prayer's nice. It's nice. It's sweet. Okay. It's wonderful to acknowledge the presence. It's wonderful to acknowledge where you come from and to give credit and credence to God's values and power through your behavior. Right. To good, righteous behavior, but none of that changes your epigenetics. Not a bit of it. Okay. Your history is at least 14 generations old in your body. You can't pray your way out of that. Okay. Like you can't turn yourself, you can't pray your way into being 6'6". You're 5'9". That's it. But what you can do is you can start to rewire your attachment to feeling worthy if you were 6'6", and rewire yourself so that you're 5'9", but you feel like you're 6'6".
Right.
It's all about changing that mentality.
Right. It's about changing the energy. Right. And so the wonderful thing about the mind is it's quick. Right.
Right.
The challenge is that it's analogous to a grain of sand. Right. So your conscious mind is analogous to a grain of sand. Your unconscious, which is your emotional body, is analogous to a 55-gallon drum of sand. Your subconscious is analogous to all the sand on planet Earth, and your superconscious, which is your spirit and your soul, is analogous to all the sand in the universe. So, do you want your soul running your life, or do you want that tiny grain of sand running your life? Most people allow that tiny grain of sand to run their life, and they think, well, if I understand a thing, then I become the thing that I understand. And it's absolute nonsense. You don't become the things that you understand. You simply know how you got from A to B, but you still don't understand what A is or what B is.
Right.
Right. And so the body of light allows us to have an opportunity to locate where those levels of trauma and stressors are and those tragedies that live in all African American bodies, and to take them out and rid them forever.
For the people who are not in your area, I mean, would you suggest mental health, like as far as seeing psychiatrists on a daily basis, or, I never done it myself, but
look, you gotta use whatever's around. If you don't know somebody like me, you gotta use whatever's around you, right? If there's a yoga class around you, go there. If there's a sound bath class, go there. If there's a breath work class, go there. If there's the only thing available to you is counseling, psychiatry, use that. Use whatever is in your reach. And if you get to a point where you feel unsatisfied by what you're going through in terms of the outcomes, then do the prudent action. Find the next person who will take you to the next place. But what I'm talking about is a solution. What you're talking about is management.
Right.
I'm not in management.
That's why I asked the question. I was wondering, what would you think would be,
So again, you got to use what's available to you, right? And you got to use what you're comfortable with. Some people, they're not going to feel comfortable talking to somebody about the things that they're struggling with, but they will feel comfortable being in the back of a yoga class, being quiet, right? Because, men, let's talk about men because we're men on the call, right?
Yep.
Men are naturally more stoic, right? So sitting down and telling someone about all the things that we're bothered about our dad and all the boo-hooing and all that stuff, it has some value, but there comes a day where it's no longer valuable because it isn't moving you beyond the thing that you experience. You understand the impact that it had on you, but it doesn't change the impact. You can get your mind around it. You can begin to accept your circumstances, but it doesn't change your circumstances. I'm talking about changing your circumstances as if they never happened.
Right. So you're saying that you're going to be able, you'll be able to get rid of the problem, and I think that's
transmute it.
Right.
Yeah, transmute it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say that because I think that, as far as like, Western medicine and or herbal medicine, I think like what I found out about herbal medicine is it takes longer to actually to go through the body, but it corrects the problem within the body. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
I think a lot of the Western medicine is just like, just keep you hanging on to keep taking the medicine.
Like it's management.
Yeah.
It's management.
It's chemical management.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If we want to nail it down, it's chemical management. And for some people, they're lazy. They're here. This is their first life on earth. They were successfully indoctrinated into the Western medical system, and that works for them. For them, that's what makes them feel safe. Mm-hmm. Right. And people are only going to do what makes them feel safe. Once you start to open your mind, obviously you guys have more open minds, or otherwise you wouldn't set up a podcast, right?
Right.
So once you start to open your mind, you start looking at Western medicine, you go, oh, there's actually limitations to that. Let me see what else is out there. And now you're seeking, and the one who seeks shall eventually find. But if you don't seek, and most people, they don't have the time to seek. Like if you look at most families, they're living paycheck to paycheck, right? If mom or dad get fired 3 months later, they could be homeless. This is real, right?
Right.
So they want a quick fix. Like, let me get the pill. I know it's not good for me, but eventually I'll make a different choice. And in the end, they don't have the time or the energy to make a different choice because they're still locked into that slave mentality. And as long as you're locked into a slave mentality, you'll never do whatever is necessary to leave the plantation because that'll feel too scary. Right? And people will always do what makes them feel the most safe. And look, it's a sobering conversation for anyone who's listening. I'm sorry. But the truth is, I have to live in reality. I don't have the ability to live in fantasy because what I do, people show up at my doorstep and they expect bona fide miracles. Right. So I got to sober them up and get them present as fast as possible and get them in the vibe. I can't pretend that this limiting belief is going to get them what they really want. I can't participate in their fantasy. So the truth is, like recognizes like. So nature has not been tampered with. If you take nature and you put it in your body is made from nature.
Right.
Your body, it's going to be easy, right? Your body's going to go, hey, I'm in here. There's something that's not supposed to be in here. It seems unnatural. Let me take that out. But if I put something in that has been manufactured and has been turned into a chemical, it may have originally come from something that's natural. But now, once it's been changed, right? The body has a difficult time benefiting from it without some kind of negative feedback. Right. So guess what? I might get rid of my sinuses, might stop running, but guess what's going to happen later? My liver is going to be really stressed. Right. So when you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, you can only go to the bank and run that game so many times before eventually the truth is you die.
Right.
Like how many people die in their 50s? How many people, like we just had a sister in track and field. She's 32 years old. She's dead. Right. So that's a sad story for me. Right. This is a woman with a lot of life, a lot of power, been to the Olympics 3 times. She's could be doing big things. But at the end of the day, when you put stuff in your body that's unnatural, it's going to put your body in an unnatural state of expression. And you can only do it so often and for so long.
Got that.
And then eventually the light is going to go out.
Right.
It's a fact.
Before we get ready to wrap, I wanted to get your opinion on this because I know, you deal with the, with Western medicine. What is your opinion on this rapid legalization of weed in just about every place now?
Okay. Look, here's the thing. If you keep the culture stupid, right? So let me give you an idea. The people who are running the country, they don't get high.
Right.
They stay sober, right? Because when their mind is sober, they see an opportunity to make a move, right? And then they make that move in a split second. Well, when you're high, the mindset is, I can get to it tomorrow, right? You lose a little bit of your internal motivation, but the question is why? Why does that happen?
Right.
Marijuana is the world's third strongest neurotoxin. What does that mean? That means it destroys cannabinoid receptors in your brain. And cannabinoid receptors are there to keep your mind calm and quiet. Because when your mind is calm and quiet, you know what you make? You make good decisions. When your mind is anxious and stressed, you make poor decisions. And so if you're going to participate in marijuana for a medicinal purpose, here's what I'll say to you. People can only use what they have within their reach. Take a risk and go to a breathwork class. Do some holotropic breathing. It doesn't cost you any money. There's no trip to the pharmacy. Your breath doesn't stink, right? There's no anxiety afterwards. You're not eating trashy food because you're high, right? You're not over consuming. You're not fixated on things that diminish your energy and your light. You're in a good flow.
Right.
So, yet the natural way is the more difficult way for people now because humans are so separated from their nature that they feel they need something to manage their anxiety. And so they're using an anxiogenic, which what it does is it comes in and it gives them a reprieve from the state of anxiety that they're in. But the second they come down off that high, now that anxiety is one notch higher.
Right.
And then the next week, it's another notch higher. And now they have no choice except to do what? To participate.
Right.
Versus reach out and go, hey, I think I'm addicted to something. And make the big choice, right? We talked about this earlier. You asked me, is prayer good? Look, if prayer is all you have, get on your knees. Okay? Pray every day. Do whatever you can to be a good person. Eat good quality food. Find somebody that will help you to reduce your anxiety. Create a pattern interrupt in the pattern that you're in. If you can create a pattern interrupt that's successful and long enough, you'll make better decisions. You'll make more money. You'll sleep better. You'll have a more positive influence over your family, over your community, over yourself.
Man. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. So listen, I want you to tell the people where they can reach you. Also, get the book Free for Life, A Navy SEAL's Path to Inner Freedom and Outer Peace, available on Amazon. Also, tell us, where we can reach you website-wise.
Yeah, it's easy. You can go to truebodyintelligence.com. And, I call it the house of full spectrum development because we develop you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And then you can get my book off the website, Free for Life, U.S. Navy SEAL's Unique Path to Inner Freedom and Outer Peace. And you can just punch my name, Christopher Lee Maher, and put podcast. I've been on a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of education out there that I give you. So at least you can start taking some steps. I go into a little bit different subject matter each time so that you're never repeating the same information. But here's the truth. In order to grok a concept, a healthy brain, that means a brain that is non-addicted to pharmaceuticals, recreational, and daily acceptable drugs. It takes a healthy brain 9 to 32 times to grok a concept. So after you listen to this podcast at least 9 times. Okay. Because there's a lot of meat on the bone. It's going to help you reframe the way that you think about things. And if you want to get a hold of me, because you want me to help you reduce your attachment to the limiting beliefs that were created and embedded in your family if you're African American, from all the things that our families have went through for 400 years.
Right.
And if you're down to get free, I'm down to help you. So you could go to the website and it says support@truebodyintelligence.com. Send us an email and we'll get back to you as fast as we can.
Wonderful. And I want to just quote something you said in your book in the prologue. You said, if any part of the book bothers you, that's a good thing.
That's right.
It's a good sign. It's a good sign.
Yeah, it's a good sign. Yeah. I'm here to trigger people, but I'm also here to initiate them into being free.
Right.
And imagine for a moment, African Americans having a real sense of freedom, what good they could do for the planet. I mean, the most powerful humans on the planet. Imagine what good work they could do. They could change the whole world.
Right.
The intellect is there. The emotional intelligence is there. The love is there. The rhythm is there. The physicality is there. The willingness to go into confrontation. The strength of will is there. I mean, they've got the whole kit and caboodle.
The passion.
Yeah.
The passion is there, right?
Yeah.
The commitment, the loyalty, the devotion, the sense of tribal behavior, and connection. It's all there. But what's stopping it is fear. And you got to reduce the fear by taking out the tension, the stress, and the distortion. If you can do that successfully, you can create a powerful life.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Wonderful. Yeah.
All right. So it was a pleasure having you on here, Chris.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Definite pleasure.
Thank you.
I tell you what, you're in some good company, man, because, only two other military cats I know as calm as you was Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers. Bob Ross was like the drill sergeant, man. You know what I mean?
It's a calm dude, man.
Some calm dudes, man. So, look, man, for real, we thank you for making space for us, making this time.
Hey, I'm happy. And if you want to reach out to me in the future, then let me give you my phone number, please.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, man. We appreciate that.
Definitely. Yeah, so you just
reach out to me. We can get into a different subject or create something, an opportunity or an event for people to come to.
Wow.
Right.
And help them. I'm totally down.
Sure.
Because I was going to say, there's a lot more questions that I had, but, we'd have gone 2 hours into this or 3 hours into this conversation, man. You know what I mean? So, maybe we can ask some questions again the next time.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'm totally down. Then when you want me to come on again, I'll definitely devote time and energy and whatever I can do to move your mission forward. We can get into those conversations.
Yeah, we really appreciate that.
We really appreciate it. All right, so just hang on a minute while we sign on off. Again, we thank you once again for your time, my friend.
Yep.
All right. So, a lot of information, and I want to tell you what ours is. The Only One Mic Podcast. You can reach us on Instagram and Twitter at The Only One Mic P1, Facebook and LinkedIn at The Only One Mic Podcast. You can reach us via email at theonlyonemic00@gmail.com. Now listen, we're on YouTube. You can check us out on all your major streaming platforms as well. Don't forget to rate the show and subscribe on anything that you check us out on. We thank you again for your time. Chris, thanks again, brother. Really appreciate you.
All right.
We encourage you to speak your truth quietly and clearly and listen to others, even the dull and the ignorant, because they too have their story to tell. So until next time, please keep in mind that we never had to run from the Ku Klux Klan, so we shouldn't have to run from a black man. Peace.
There you go.